Bob Futrell used project management as a career-building tool for the last 30 years across several employers. Like many job seekers, he started out in a technical capacity as a specialist and became an accidental project manager because he became the senior person on the team, learning how to manage as he went and making a lot of mistakes along the way. After gaining some experience and a certification, he began teaching others how to do it in 1993 while still practicing the craft. He now brands himself as a project management expert, publishing a 1,677-page textbook with Prentice Hall, teaching with 3 universities, and showing how the skills of project management can help anyone in mid-career, whether they consider themselves managers or not. Few people work entirely alone. Learn more about Bob through his website, which is bobfutrell.com. And let's give it up for Bob Futrell.
Thank you. Can you hear me with this thing? I'm on. Good. Glad to see that everybody made it through the floods to get here today. That's nice. A little challenging for some. And good to see everybody. I've been in your spot many times. As you can tell, I'm not quite older than dirt, but maybe older than oil. So I've been around a while. And I wanted to talk to you today about inflection points in your career. I've heard a lot about people moving into different career fields, and I have done it. And that's what I want to share with you today, and to consider capitalizing on some of your previous experience. It may apply to something you hadn't even considered before. So that's what we're going to talk about today, launching yourself on a project management career. Where are you now in your career search? Are you a fresh out or a novice? Are you an early mid-career, late mid-career? Are you at the pinnacle of your career? Or are you nearing retirement? I've been through all of those. Is this your first career change? Are you retooling for some new technology? Second career change, third career change? Almost nobody works in the same place at the same job for 30 years and gets a gold watch anymore. It's not unusual to be shifting around. You're all aware of that now. Well, this is about me, and I have been all over the place, as Kathy described a little bit. Got a bunch of certifications along the way, and I've been doing mostly project management, and more recently, teaching people how to do it. And let me tell you, any course you go to, you want to learn from a practitioner, somebody that's done it a lot, because they've got a lot of experience to share. And my career has taken me through a lot of companies, some of which you'll see in the slide here in a minute. But I started out as a techie. And I mean, when I started in the programming world, we're talking about punch cards and paper tape. Most people don't even know what that is now. You do. There was an old timer. And I have always had this hankering to work with machinery. I didn't want to work with people. They were unpredictable. Whatever I put into the machine, I got something out. It was predictable. So that's where I started, and a lot of you are starting there too. It's a specialty, something that interests you, often aligned with your personality. I've managed to go through a bunch of universities, picking up degrees and certifications along the way, and even tried my hand at publishing. Went through Prentice Hall, published a giant textbook, got reprinted in Chinese and Russian, and let me tell you, that is an experience to try and work with the publishers. I don't want to do that again. And I've also been a quality examiner. And that's interesting because I get to stick my nose in a lot of businesses and see what they do. So I've picked up a lot. So I have a lot of experience, as you probably do. You stick around as long as I have, you'll have a lot of experience. Time is a really great teacher. Unfortunately, it kills all its pupils eventually. Sorry. But capitalize on that. So I want to share some lessons learned from my 40 years of doing this. to capitalize on your hidden talents, some things you may not even thought about, and to recognize career inflection points. You're probably at one now if you're in this room. And then to get yourself certified in this thing called project management. And I'm going to give you a little bit of taste of what that really is. The first thing you do is, when you find yourself looking for something else to do, is take a skills inventory. What am I good at? What do I like to do? What kind of work have you done? And that's not just I had this title in that company and this title in that company. No. What skills have you applied? Do a lot of people management? Do a lot of financial work? Do a lot of techie programming kind of work? What? What would you like to do? This means look at your hobbies, things that you enjoy doing. Because if you can marry those two, they say that if you're doing something you love, you never work a day in your life. Now here's a tool I want to make you aware of. It's called the Work Style Patterns Inventory. And this is really good at matching specific people with specific jobs. It measures job fit, and it can find discrepancies between what you like to do and what you are doing, or what the job requires. The required approach to doing an assignment, or the approach that you prefer. And any mismatch in these two is going to give you a lot of stress. And that can lead to poor performance and other consequences. McFletcher.com has this tool. You want to go there and look at that. But it evaluates 72 specific work activities across 4 scales, which are like task activities. Do you like to tinker and do stuff and work one-on-one doing task work? Or is it project work, which is a little broader? We'll talk more about that in a minute. Perhaps it's organizational-wide stuff. You have a very broad span. You touch a lot of people and a lot of different things. Or maybe it's just adapting. But this tool will give you an understanding of the job or the team working requirements of what you want to do. And it can quantify how people want to perform those work activities, how they experience their role, and how the organization expects the role to be experienced. So they have typical organizational roles, like task stuff, working directly with products or services, such as writing reports, designing, measuring your own results, teaching, dealing face-to-face with customers, and I heard some of that already this morning. But some of it is project-oriented work, which means coordinating projects and people. And anybody with kids knows that you're always trying to coordinate a bunch of people to do stuff. It means assigning and scheduling tasks. It means measuring group results, coaching and training others. And then it might be organization-wide stuff, influencing goals and results, like developing strategies and goals and measurements and budgeting and things like that. And then adapting, some combination of these kinds of things. The work style that the tool will sort you into is things that have to do with planning and influencing, which would be kind of strategic and manager kind of stuff. Some of you have a natural inclination to do that kind of work. You like doing that, controlling things and setting up and doing long-range planning and that kind of thing. Or it might be coordinating, which is a little closer to where the work gets done, and that's supervisory kind of stuff, where you want to control a few people and direct them, but it's not real high-level strategy looking way down the road kind of stuff. Or it's just doing, working on tasks, very tactical stuff. So the tool measures those kind of things And here's a set of personality descriptions that tend to like working in these different categories of manager, supervisor, or worker. And they've called some the adapter, the synthesist, innovator, challenger, manager, promoter. If any of those words strike you, then that's the kind of place that you might want to be. And when you get the results of this, what you get is something that says, well, this is what I prefer to do. I prefer to do something with a real high work or task orientation kind of work. And I kind of like the manager stuff too. But I'm not really into supervising day-to-day work. I'm not the supervisor type. But if the job you got looked like this, then there's going to be some stress points there where they don't match up. You're going to feel uncomfortable in that. And that's what this tool helps you identify. Now, some employers use a job fit testing tool. They'll validate resumes, because you're all aware that a resume is a one-sided balance sheet. Nobody puts on there the whole stuff they messed up. They only put the good stuff down, right? Sometimes it'll say, I'm a Java programmer. That means I touched it sometime in the past. I may not be very good at it, but yeah, I'm a beginner. Well, there are companies like these which will give an employer a test for a fee. They'll test you and find out, are you novice, mid-range, or expert at that particular skill? And that's useful if you're an employer, or understand that an employer could do that. Of course, we all know that you want to put as many keywords on your resume as possible so that you can at least get in the view of somebody. The purpose of a resume is to get an interview. The purpose of an interview is to get a job offer. You don't want to put too many things too fast in that game. For example, if it says Java programmer, you want to find out if they're students or experts, objectively. Well, what kind of work have you been doing? Probably an assortment of tasks and things. How about organizing your kid's soccer club? Anybody do that kind of work? Anybody volunteer to do any of that kind of stuff? Nobody? A few. I can't believe you grow up with kids around here. Soccer fields are everywhere. What about organizing the church bazaar, or some kind of garage sale or something like that? Those are the kind of things that test your organizational skill. Well, are these projects, or is this ongoing operation? This is an important distinction. Most of you start your careers in some kind of specialty area. Whatever it is, technology, healthcare, finance, whatever, but you start at the bottom because you're entry level. But what's the difference between projects and operations? When you go into any organization to see about working for them, you need to understand what they're doing to find out if you fit. You want to identify their ongoing operation. This is what makes them their money day to day. This is the bread and butter of their function, whatever market they're serving. And this is going to be very day-to-day oriented. It's the kind of thing that if it's not working well, their operation's not going well, everybody stops whatever they're doing to fix the problem, because that's where they get their income. If it's a factory, then they make widgets or whatever, and shipping as many widgets as possible is their day-to-day work. So that's their operation. Those kinds of things are measured by consistency. They want very high volume, usually. They want availability, uptime, responsiveness, that kind of thing. They want efficiency, very high yield for input, and very low waste in efficiency. That's operations. And most of you have probably spent some time in doing a lot of that. However, a project is very different. Here's the definition: a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product or service. And that differentiates it from operations, because operations are repeatable. Same thing, over and over. Consistency. Projects are new and different every time. Even if it's the same kind of thing you've done before, like a home builder. You know that a home builder will make the same floor plan every fifth house in a neighborhood. And they stamp them out pretty much. But they treat each one as a separate little project. They are essentially an operation of projects. Because the elevation, the land is going to be different. Therefore, they have to adjust. The customer is likely to be different. They want to track all the costs to that customer, so separate project. They may use different subcontractors for each one. Therefore, they need to treat each of those because of the differences in it. But essentially, their business is an operation of projects, building houses. Projects end when their objectives have been met, they built the house, or it is terminated for some reason. Not all projects succeed. A % of success is okay in some cases, and you just stop. But somebody has to declare it terminated in that sense. It can be large or small, short or long time, doesn't matter. You could be getting paid for it, maybe not. Maybe it's volunteer work. But it differs from ongoing operations. Projects are all about change. Whereas operations are all about consistency, projects are about change. Usually changing something in that operation to make it better or whatever. To put in a new system or a new process. And by the way, whenever there's a project going on, there's an opportunity, because there are a lot of unknowns. And that's a good inflection point for you to step in and help. Usually these things have a longer range focus. And the typical metrics for a project are not consistency. They are scope, schedule, cost, and quality to deliver the change. And those things are what we call, people call them the triple constraint, although there's 4 things there. Because you've got the scope, the schedule, and the cost that you have to balance. Because if somebody keeps increasing the scope, well, then you better increase the schedule or the cost too, or you're going to end up in a problem. You're going to have scope creep. But you got to do all this with a certain level of quality, or nobody will like the result. Getting it out of the bag is a problem. I brought a project for you today. People ask me, how do you get those 3 sides into a 4-sided shape? And here it is. This is called a tetrahedron with 4 triangle-shaped sides. One of them is scope, one of them is schedule, one of them is cost, and one of them is quality. And when you are involved in a project, somebody has tried to figure out ahead of time what these ought to be. And then during the execution of the project, they try to maintain the shape. Because if scope gets too big, this shape gets all out of whack and you're in big trouble. So a whole lot about projects is just managing the change. Change is good, you need it, but you got to be able to manage it. And that's what project management's all about. Managing change. There's my shape. So businesses really need to be separating these two. And I go and consult a lot of them, and they don't do that. They have them all mushed together, and it's very hard to tell what's going on. And here's what's going on in most organizations. They've got business objectives, and they've got that operation, that day-to-day thing going on. But they also have a number of little projects going on. And you can consider the set of projects they're doing, and there's always something going on. That's their portfolio, and they view it as an investment. And if you can join one of those projects as an investment and bring something to them, then you become valuable. Often the same staff does both of these. Spend some of your time doing day-to-day work, but you have to break off and do some of the long-term project stuff too. because you have the knowledge of what's going on in the operation. You're good at that. You know that. In fact, these two things get reviewed differently, or they should. And grassroots projects are ones where the people in the operation doing it day to day say, gee, there's a better way to do this. But I can't make that happen by myself. I got to have 3 or 4 helpers and a little bit of time to work on it to put it in place. That's a grassroots project. Because who better knows how to fix that operation than the people doing it every day? But other projects might be strategic. They come from the top of the organization and say, we want to be a different company doing something else 5 years from now. Well, we got to get started now. We will spawn some projects and put some funds out there in order to go and be ready 5 years from now. We're going to change the organization over 5 years. So, to sort of recap this, projects are a bunch of independent things going on in a company, and there's usually a lot of them. If you hear that word, you should perk up and ask some questions. They may also have something called a program. And the only difference between a project and a program is that projects have to end. Remember I said they were temporary? They all start, and they all have to end. That, by the way, is why I've chosen project management as a career path for me, because I didn't like working some places. And I knew the project was going to end if I got married to the project instead of the company, and I could get away. And that's worked. If they like me and I like them, that would be another project, and I keep going. But I learned that there's not a whole lot of loyalty in companies. If times are bad, they'll, yeah, you have a question?
Yeah, I think you just got to the key point, all the games for education and healthcare. Is that educating someone is important.
It is.
Working with a patient with projects and healthcare from the time I started in school on the level.
Yeah.
Moving from the project to an operation.
Yeah. What she's talking about is healthcare. Yeah, I'm going to try and repeat. What she's talking about is healthcare and education are essentially little projects. You're trying to get a different outcome by the education or on the patient. And so you're right. That's an operation of little projects, if you organize them that way. One of the axioms of project management is those you only want to plan and track to the level you're willing to. So if you make it too detailed and you're tracking, did you do this, did you do this? Well, then you micromanage and you're end up too narrow. But if you have well-trained people doing those things, you trust them to make the big moves in between. But that is exactly right. Right. Yes. Anyway, so there's some projects going on that are independent. There are some that are related to each other. That's what a program is. The difference between a project and a program, they run the same way, except that a program may never end. As long as there's projects to do in it, it just keeps going. All of that's called portfolio. And when you go into a company, somebody on a spreadsheet or someplace is keeping this information. They got to. That's their investment. Because when a project's going on, you haven't produced anything yet, therefore, there's no payback yet. When the project starts producing results, whether they be product, some new product, or perhaps a productivity improvement or a cost saving or something like that, you don't get the benefit of it until you finish the project. What do project managers do? Well, they initiate, they plan, they execute, they monitor and control what's going on, and they close it down. That's it. Woo! Mission impossible. Now, I'm old enough to remember that. You notice how things change over the years? I go into Target now, and I swipe my card, and the little sign says, swipe card now. And I go, that used to mean steal. I don't understand. What happened? And worse, as a teacher, I have to be careful with my choice of words sometimes, because when I was going to school, a thong was a little rubber shoe I wore in the shower, and somehow it turned into underwear along the way, and I don't know where that is, so I got to be careful when I say I'm running around my thong, because people get the wrong idea. Words change over time. I've learned that. Well, here's what's going on in a project. The level of activity is what's shown there under those little curves. You do a bunch of initiating work, get started. That's usually the hardest part for a project manager because you're putting order to chaos. If you're a naturally organized person, this is a great fit for you. You do a lot of this kind of work. It's getting people on the same page, it's getting the story clear, and what the objectives are. Because at the beginning of a project, everybody doesn't know. They just know they have to do something. But then there's a bunch of planning. How are we going to get the objective done? And then you execute it. That's executing the plan you made. And then you monitor and control during the whole event. And then at the end, you close it. That means you tell everybody, we're done. Here's where the results are. We're putting away things we need to save, and we're throwing away the rest that we don't. And there you go. You've closed it. People need closure. It's a human need. That's why we have funeral services. They're for the people who remain because the deceased is gone. Which is why if you can't get closure on something like that airplane that went down in the Pacific, and I don't think they still found it yet. That the people associated with that just can't get closure. It's a human need. Good project managers make closing very important. If you took that curve and smoothed it out, said, well, this is where all the work's going to be done. Those could be hours or dollars paid out to get it done. If you took that curve and plotted it cumulatively, same information, you get this thing called an S-curve. And all that's telling you is where that red star is where you're going to finish, which is final cost and when you're going to finish. And that's what managers or anybody that's sponsoring a project cares about. How much is it going to cost me and when are you going to be done? And that's what project managers do, is try and track to that little S-curved line. You could end up being late, but within budget, or you could end up being on time, but over budget, or somewhere, some combination of them. In other words, that little red star is going to be off to the upper right somewhere. And that's what project managers do, is try and track and achieve those objectives that way. Job descriptions vary depending on industry, but they're all going to be doing planning, scheduling, coordinating, and working with people. So look into your skills inventory and find out how much of that stuff you've actually been doing. The 10 most important skills and competencies for project managers are people skills, leadership, listening, integrity, ethical behavior, consistency, strong at building trust, and I forget his name, but the negotiator guy in here knows about this building trust, because that's the name. There you are. That's the name of that game. You have to build trust, and that's difficult to do, but you can do it in little small steps and work up to the big thing later. And that's very important for project managers because they do a lot of negotiating. Verbal communication. Project managers spend 75 to 80% of their time communicating. They're reading or writing, they're speaking or listening. A lot of it. Because it's management. It is people skill stuff. These soft skills. Oops. So, are you good at any of these things now? Would you like to be? Or get better at some of them? Here's the context. The large circle in the middle of this, oh, this thing has a pointer. Yeah, this large circle up here represents the body of knowledge of all possible project managers. Not all of it's written down, but it's what people have experienced and figured out along the way. And it intersects things like interpersonal skills. You've got to be able to get along with some people. General management knowledge and skills. Because it is management, there are some management kinds of things to learn. How to motivate, how to lead, that kind of thing. It may also include some financial kind of stuff, budgeting, tracking. You also have to have an understanding of your environment to do a project. You have to know the lay of the land. You have to know the culture of the organization, that kind of thing. I've done projects at high-tech companies, Texas Instruments, Motorola, AMD, very engineering, tech-oriented cultures. They'll tell you, you just get it done by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, I don't care what. And they don't care how you get it done, as long as you get it done when they said. And you did it without doing anything illegal, or at least getting caught. That's the way that works. But when I did state projects, they're not those kinds of cultures. You can't demand that people do things by 8 o'clock the next morning. You have to use a lot more relationship behavior in those cultures to get people motivated and do things for you. So I've learned how to do that. Big head change from those two cultures. But any project manager and any job seeker, when you go in, you've got to try and figure out what is this culture I'm in here that I'm about to join. And then there's application area, knowledge and practice. So this would be where you usually start your career. This would be healthcare or construction or IT work or whatever. Okay? You got to know the lingo of that particular application area or domain. So you need all of those things. There we go. All of those things to intersect here in this body of knowledge that's about project management. And there's an organization called the Project Management Institute that has the best collection of all those ideas in this book called The Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge, or the PMBOK Guide. So it's that little set there. That's what they've been able to write down. And all the certification stuff is about learning what's in this book, basically. But I'm suggesting that you probably know already a good deal about that. So are you skilled at projects, operations, or both? Take a little inventory of yourself. So consider this. If you were arrested for being a project manager, could they find any evidence? They'd be looking for, do you have a project plan? Do you have your scope understood? Do you have cost estimates, schedule estimates? Do you have some kind of organization structure with roles, responsibilities, and ground rules for doing things? Have you thought about the risks involved? Because all projects are about the future. They all have uncertainty in them. You can't plan, you can't know everything up front. You have to discover a lot of it as you go through it. And do you have a way to measure your performance? And there's a number of techniques. So, have you gained any project management experience on the job so far? I'll bet almost all of you have. You just didn't know it. Well, could you document any of that? You might have to think real hard about that. My guess is you can. Well, I want to share with you some lessons learned here about recognizing career inflection points, because you're at one right now. You might have acquired enough skills to go in a new direction, and I think some of you are already thinking along these lines. So you were a specialist in something in your previous work. But now consider being a leader of specialists. In other words, most of the project managers that I teach how to do all these techniques didn't plan to be a project manager to begin with. They became accidental project managers, just like I did. I started as a techie, didn't want to deal with people, but I ended up being a senior techie, and then they said, "Here, Bob, lead this project for us." Huh? What? How do I do that? I've had to learn a lot. So is this an inflection point in your career trajectory? If so, consider capitalizing on your professional and personal work. Consider your volunteer activities, personal relations, hobbies, and part-time skills, and other project kinds of things that you have done. I've noticed, I'm sharing my older-than-oil wisdom here, I've noticed 3 stages in life here. This seems to be pretty general, I've noticed. It's all about learning when you're starting out. Even little babies are little sponges. Man, do they just take in everything around them. They just learn all the time. And you raise your kids that way. Kids are always learning. they're open to learning. But then the middle part of the life is mostly about mating and family, and that pretty much dominates your thinking and a lot of your actions through much of your midlife. But then you start being senior in your job or in the family or whatever, and you have kids around, and you start teaching them. You start being a mentor. You are helping the junior people. You may not have thought that you were going to go that direction, but that's what happens. So I look at my own career trajectory. I got out of school a long time ago. In fact, that's a picture of me in the 70s with long hair. I wish I had that hair now. But I started as just a member of the technical staff doing programming, and then I became a lead, and then I became a team leader. So the transformation was already starting to happen to me, but I didn't know it yet. And I kind of hit an inflection point. And then I became an assistant project manager, and a project manager, and a senior, and a development manager, and a project management office manager, and all of those kinds of things. So I just drifted into this management thing. And what's happened in the later part of my career is I've started teaching. I formally started teaching people about these things and become a lead, an adjunct professor, and a consultant, going into organizations and looking at them. And it's really interesting what you see when you go in and look at organizations a lot. And I've been an auditor, so I stuck my head in some. And and since 2011, I've been on an engineering team with UT to look at the state's giant child support redesign system down at on Old Torf. We'll go twice a year, a team of 8 of us from UT, and I'm the project management expert, so I'm assessing their techniques on this $250 million 10-year project to build the state's next version of the child support system. Very interesting. In fact, it's getting some press because Attorney General Abbott, running for governor, that's his sort of biggest project during the term of his serving as Attorney General. Anyway, this has been my trajectory, and I've gotten some certifications along the way. And I've put some logos of some of the companies and places that I've worked along the way, and some of the professional organizations I've belonged to, and some of the universities I've been associated with. And I'm here today representing the Austin Community College, which has a little table set up in the back, and there's some representatives here that can talk to you about some of their programs. So I view life as a continuous learning experience. You're always learning. And I view it like this. You start out in a specialty, whatever it was, whatever you picked as your major in school or your specialty, what you liked to do. And you gained a lot of domain knowledge. You probably worked on some projects, and you picked up little bits and pieces of what that was by watching the project manager you're working for. You may even have done some of the things they asked you to do, like make a schedule or manage a little subcontractor or something like that. But you were doing little bits and pieces. You may have even gotten up to the level of just general management of a big operation and projects. But this is sort of the educational pyramid. So here's some illustration of what's going on there. This is your subdomain, your professional career path. This might be healthcare, construction, finance, IT, whatever. And then projects cut across that. Because what's in this body of knowledge book doesn't have anything to do with any particular domain. This is generic stuff. They do not prescribe one different set of things for healthcare, one different set of things for construction. The principles are all the same, which is why they've been able to get it in this book. So it doesn't really matter what domain you learn from. The techniques are the same. And everybody who's teaching you comes from one of these specialty domain areas. Got to. That was how they learned. There we go. So, something else to consider. A lot of companies have a functional management ladder. There's some kind of pyramid. You know what the hierarchy looks like. on an org chart, for instance. And some of the larger companies have a technical ladder where they'll have like, a junior engineer, engineer and senior engineer, and then member of the technical staff, and then senior fellow, and all these kinds of pay grades. That's what they are, that parallel management pay grades. That's a ladder. And some companies have a project management ladder as well. In other words, you can grow in that career path too, because what you're really doing is you're putting one foot in management and one foot in a technical specialty of some kind, and that's what you're managing. And I've managed a career ladder like this at Texas Instruments, and I have here an example of a Motorola one. They had 9 project management competencies that they rated. Here they are. And they had pay grades associated with these titles all the way up to VP of project management from a low entry-level project manager. So they had a parallel pay grade scale for all of this. So you can get into this game. So consider officializing. That's a word I learned at the Attorney General's project. That's what they call approving. But you can officialize your acquired skill set and be a project manager. Now, what's different about project management? Well, you probably already have some knowledge of it, but what you need detail about is some of the language and the context and the specific processes that are used. And that's what's in this body of knowledge book. And you need to have some knowledge of how to develop a computer-based information system to gather information during the project. And some components of a project plan, which are going to be things like a charter and a work breakdown structure and maybe networks for planning and scheduling projects. So there's some components that you learn when you learn about formal project management. Maybe you need to learn about some behaviors to enhance your soft skills, which are very important for managing and motivating people. But consider there's a lot of different certification organizations for this. The Project Management Institute is the one that most people hear about because they market the most. But there are others. And Project Management Institute has done the best job of putting together a published body of knowledge. And there's a lot of training around associated with that body of knowledge. But again, I would recommend that whatever training you get in anything, you get it from practitioners, and you don't try and do it all at once. I really discourage people from trying to take the cram it all in 1 week, 8 hours a day kind of course, because it's just too hard. You can't absorb the information. It's too much. And so I recommend you spread it out in a traditional kind of, pick it up a little bit at a time over 6 or 8 weeks. Do some homework, think about it, do some individual readings, do some exercises and that kind of thing. And you'll absorb it much, much better. But there's also, if you're in the computing industry, this thing called CompTIA, which is actually a pretty neat one, I think, because all they did was adopt the PMI's body of knowledge. So their little test is based on it's basically the same kind of test. And I encourage people to take that as a preamble to the PMI stuff because it tests the same stuff, the same way, in the same testing centers and all of that. And if you pass it, I use just practice, but if you pass it, wow, you get something to put on your resume anyway, even if you're not in IT. CompTIA has a whole bunch of widely recognized certifications in IT, so that's why it's the computing technology industry one. But there's another organization here called the American Society for the Advancement of Project Management. And that's kind of interesting because the original author of this book was a guy named Bill Duncan back in 1996 that structured it the way it is. And he thought this information should be free. And so he got crossways with PMI management at the time who wanted to charge a lot for it. It seems, a nonprofit organization, if you're going to promote a specialty, it ought to be free. That was his thinking. Anyway, he ended up leaving PMI as director of standards, and he went and started his own company right here, his own organization. And he purposely put it in small letters because he wanted to show it was subordinate to the members. it turns out that this is the only United States organization that belongs to the International Project Management Association, because they'll only have country organizations as members. They don't have individuals. And that's pretty cool. So there's an Australian one and a UK one and a whole bunch of others. And they have a certification. Well, here's the CompTIA information. 90-minute test. Go to this CompTIA.org and you can see about it. It's called Project Plus. All other certifications end in plus. This one's Project Plus. Here's the International Project Management Association's certification path. They start you out with a level D, certified associate, and then certified project manager, certified senior, and director. This is not based on a test so much. Whereas the PMI one, you have to pass a big test. The test is hard. They purposely aim it at failing 30% of the people because they want to keep this credential exclusive. So it's difficult. You do have to get some fair amount of training for it. But this group says, we care less about you being able to pass a test. That doesn't tell me you're a good project manager. These guys actually come out and interview you and your boss and your customers and your peers to find out if you really are managing projects well and following techniques and things. So this is a competency-based scheme, whereas what PMI is using is a exam-based, knowledge-based scheme. You have to produce evidence of some experience, and that's how they try to quantify your competency. But it's not the same. PMI, as I said, they started a long time ago. They've got roughly 500,000 or so members worldwide. And I got some more statistics here in a moment. Students can join them at a reduced fee and earn this thing called a Certified Associate in Project Management, which is like a stepping stone to their premier credential that was being discussed earlier, PMP, Project Management Professional. But I've got all of those. This is the body of knowledge that's in this book. And all it is are how to manage scope, time, which is schedule, cost, and quality. These are the core areas. Somewhat technical and financial there, because you got to build schedules and a little bit of math involved, but not much. And then there's the supporting ones, like HR management, motivating people, managing people, leading, communications, because it's all about communicating what's going on, assessing risks, and any of you have worked on a project that you seem to think was really smooth, there was probably a project manager doing very good risk management. So there were no giant bumps and crises. You looked around the corner and you avoided them. Procurement management. Now, a lot of people that enter my classes have some of this experience because somebody forced them into doing it. They became accidental project manager. Here, make me a schedule. And they figured that out, how to do that. And if they run into that again, they can do it again. Because experience is disorganized education. And by that I mean there was no syllabus of problems or directives that you ran into. Somebody gave you, so you figured it out. You need to take some kind of class that is organized education in order to fill in those blanks. So now we're talking about something like procurement management. Not that many people know very much about contracts and intellectual property and the things that go on there. Because you got a purchasing department, and they take care of that kind of stuff. You have to fill in those blanks yourself. And that's what good training will do. And then all of this stuff is integrated together, and there's also stakeholder management, which is about tying all of those things together, supported by definitions, context, and processes. So here's all the stuff off the web pages. There's the Project Management Professional, which is the premier certification, and the Certified Associate, which is a stepping stone element, entry to that. And then they have a bunch of specialized ones in scheduling and risk management and agile methods and programs and that sort of thing. They've certified about 600,000 people as of June, worldwide. And you can see the growth in this. I got mine way back here on the wall. That's what comes from being older than oil. But I've been teaching it pretty much during this whole process. So what does this mean? It means you passed a test. You're knowledge-based. Some of those need to be competency-based to show that you have the skill. There is a chapter in town to help with this stuff. Very active. They meet down at the UT Thompson Center once a month, fourth Tuesday. And if you want to get into this, go to one of those meetings one time and see what goes on. Those are all people that are interested in this too, many of them seeking certification. So don't be discouraged. Getting yourself certified. Here's some information about how to approach that. And there are courses everywhere, as I said. And I'm representing ACC today, so they have a set of courses which are described in the back of the room there on that little table with the sign sticking up. Start here, get there, get certified. And the certificate program has things like these in it. The PMI one, the CompTIA one. We also have some Microsoft things if you want to get into the tools. But project management is not about tools. I've had a lot of people say, Bob, I don't need your class because I know how to use Microsoft Project. I said, well, great. Then you don't need to know how to write well because you know how to use Microsoft Word. It's the same thing. So here's our recommended path, is that you start with this thing. It's called IT Project Management because it's in the High Tech Institute. And like I said, you have to teach project management from some perspective. And now, we could offer and say, well, we've got a healthcare one and we've got a construction one, but it's all the same stuff. So all that's required is that you're able to understand what they're talking about in the book. And it's not programming or anything, it's not even very techy. Here's the textbook, aimed at college entrance level, and it uses examples of what an IT department does. So they roll out equipment and they install some software, they put up a website and they train people, and this pretty much could be anything. And that's okay. But you need to learn, what I recommend to people is that they look at Amazon, which has this book in it, and Amazon will let you read a chapter or something of it. And if you can read those examples and understand what they're talking about, you won't have any trouble understanding the concept in the course, because there's nothing really techy about it. And what I've learned is most people today are carrying around smartphones and they're all familiar with the internet and the web and all that stuff, so it's okay. They can grasp that stuff. It's pretty easy. But what I recommend is you take that course, takes 8 weeks, you get it twice a week, whether you can do it online or on site, using the same textbook, the same presentations, the same exams. It's just the experience of online is a little different from the experience on site. But use that, and then when you get done with this course, you meet at least one of the qualifications to apply for taking the certification, and that's that you have taken recent education. That's it. But a lot of people aren't going to have enough hours to qualify, or the PMI will not invite you to sit for the exam for right away because you don't have enough experience in certain areas. But having taken the course, you now have some knowledge to volunteer or somehow step in to do some of that work and build up your resume on those items to get those hours you need to show I have some experience at that. You can go organize the soccer club if you want to. But when you're finally invited to sit for an exam, that's when you sit down and do one of these crash prep courses. They're all day Saturday, 5 Saturdays. And you do that just before your appointment to sit for the exam, and you'll be as sharp as you'll ever be. They have to be all-day courses then, because the exam itself is 4.5 hours. So to do practice exams, you've got to have a pretty good chunk of time. And the instructor that we use for that has let his certification expire several times so he could go take the test again and know what's on it. Now that's dedication. But he's very good. So our recommended progression is you start down there. To get there, you start with the 1023 Project Management Foundation course. And then you prepare your application for the certifying organization, whichever one that is. And if they approve it, well, then you're ready to sit for the exam, provided you've boned up well. And that just before you take that exam is when we recommend you take the prep course, and you're all done there. So then you can take those exams and get there. And I have lots of testimonials from people. We've trained about 800 or so people through this in the last 10 years. And I've got emails and testimonials from them that, hey, Bob, it worked exactly like you said it would work. This is the way to do it for the least money. You can also get something in this stuff called Agile Certified Practitioner, which is just about different techniques in project management, and Risk Management Professional. But those are specialty. You don't have to do the other ones first. These are independent. And you can also get that tool certification if you wanted. That one's coming from Microsoft, actually. So start here, get there with this program. And that's all I wanted to talk to you about today.
Thank you so
Okay?
much. Let's give him a hand.